Okay, make sure everybody's back here. Looks like it. Okay. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. Um, let's see, make sure we're on here. Okay, so again, the idea here, whenever we come together, we need so much of what we do is about connection and trust and relationships. Um, so it's important that we model those things. You know, how we start a meeting, how we start a practice, how we end a session. Uh, and I love this idea of humanity and high performance. And I got to give Julie credit on that one. You know, I was thinking high performance, and she really, brought it to the front. You know, it's about balancing humanity and high performance. So thank you for doing that. And we'll probably do something similar to that every time we get together, and you'll meet different people and you can continue, building your relationships along the way. So what I thought we would do today, Julie and I were talking about it. I do have material that I have in my back pocket ready to go that we can use as a catalyst. But we thought we would start at least with using this as an opportunity to literally continue the conversations from the conference. So giving some space for people to follow up, ask other questions, share things maybe they've tried before we just jump into something else. So having said that, Colin volunteered to share something. I put him on the spot there. You mind sharing something that you've tried since the conference?
Uh, Thanks, Wade. I'd love to. The conference inspired me to reach out to one of my connections. I did a course with Heather Lambsden, who's a coach at Kimberly Nordic, earlier this year, and over beers, we kind of said, "Hey, we should do something." But conference just kind of instilled me to action, and we set a date for a camp in September. We haven't done a master's camp before, or at least, it's been a long time coming. So a dryland master's camp, and we'll talk about some of the topics that we covered at the conference, talk about connection, um, talk about how coaching works. Like trying to teach someone something is often a tough task. And yeah, so we're just the all I wanted to say is that we're now planning a group collaboration camp with Kimberly Nordic. So Foothills and Kimberly Nordic are coming together.
Excellent. Well done. Sounds exciting. Is there anything that you would want to ask this group in terms of advice or suggestions on the next best steps, or you feel like you got it?
On the next step, I always solicit topics. So the question would be, is there a 15-minute topic that has resonated with athletes that would be appropriate for a master's camp to have around the campfire?
Maybe could you put that in the chat, and then we can have it documented too. Because what'll end up happening in these sessions is we might not always be able to answer these questions, but it'll trigger some reflection, and maybe somebody comes back to it later or follows up with an email.
Will do.
Yeah. Did anyone have any feedback, thoughts, comments on what Colin just shared? Okay, while you're taking some time to reflect on that, um, I'll just open it up to the group. Was there anything that someone wanted to follow up on from our time together at the conference, since you've had time to have some space away from that? Something that you felt we rushed through, or you wanted to follow up on, or you've been thinking more about, or that you've learned that you want to share?
Hey Wade,
Yes.
you got to read this book onto audiobook because I do a lot of driving to coach. So want to listen to your book on audiobook. So just can you make that happen?
An audio book. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good idea. You want to do that for me? Sounds
I'm
like
gonna get to it, but if it was on audiobook, I'd have it done already.
oh, but no, that's too easy. You gotta work for it. I'm not gonna just give it to you.
Okay.
No, but it's funny you say that because that does happen a lot. People will look at the coach will look at the book and you expect me to read all that? I'm not going to read all that. Well, it doesn't have to read it all in one sitting. It takes some time. But yes, plane rides and bus rides, I get it for sure.
Yeah.
Well, at the risk of hogging things, Wade, I just do want to say thanks for the depth of some of the information you shared at the conference. I was able to take detailed notes, and I plan to share that with my other master's coaches on a kind of a trickle down effect. So thanks for being thorough enough in the teach the teacher sort of mode. So that was great.
I appreciate that. Yeah, there's some follow-up for sure, some interesting ideas that came out of that. So why don't we try this? I realize we're kind of putting people on the spot here, and we do have limited time together. I'm gonna poke the bear a little bit. I'll share with you a recent experience I had, and I have some prompts in there that should be good catalyst for some conversation, just to keep us going here. So I'm gonna go ahead and share a screen again. Let's do this one. Okay. And Julie and I were talking about this. So, have something ready just in case, keep us moving. So when I am asked to kind of lead these type of sessions, more and more, especially when you got 45 minutes, 50 minutes, it's kind of get in, get out, and be a bit of a catalyst for some reflection. And then we can always follow up, right? So it's not about giving a lecture for an hour. It's more present one idea, get people thinking about it. So a big idea that I thought would align well with what we talked a lot about at the conference is this idea of psychological safety. And this is this is how you define this. And you've come across this, I'm sure, in different formats in other places, not a new idea, but I think it has a real direct impact on bringing the humanity into high performance, right? And I haven't seen a lot of research on this in coaching in particular. There is for sure a little bit in around sports psychology and performance psychology, things like that. But this idea of, a feeling and a belief that you can share your thoughts, opinions, ideas freely without fear of being degraded or shamed. So this is what we're trying to create in our community, our coaching community, our Nordic community. But we would want to have this, I could argue that, this should be maybe a metric, an evaluation item that we use when we evaluate clubs and coaches and programs. This should be one of the core kind of indicators that we're on the right track. We're doing something right. Do we create environments that are where people feel psychologically safe? And this really hit me. And there'll be some pauses here so we can all reflect and share experiences. But this really hit me a little while ago. I was asked to be part of another learning group with a group of Olympic and high performance coaches in different sports. There's about 15 of us, and we met in San Francisco, and we visited some places, some high performance places. And one of the places we visited was Google X. And Google X is, if you're not familiar with that, that's the innovation arm of Google. So this is where they really, the moonshots. They put the best brains together from around the world that they can get, and they try and tackle the most ridiculous, crazy problems facing humanity and give them unlimited resources, say, figure it out. What could we do? And this is where the self-driving autonomous cars came out of that project, that group. And it's a really neat space, a physical space. It's actually an old mall. that Google bought and converted into their workspace for Google X. If you're ever out in San Francisco and you want to take a look, you may be able to get a tour or at least go take a peek. They do have kind of a public area. And so what does this have to do with psychological safety and coaching? So when we were there, this was a group of people, and way off to the left of your screen, the second person from the left, he's now the head coach of the New Zealand All Blacks. So at the time, he was being groomed to be the next coach. So he jumped onto this group so he could also kind of expand his perspective on performance. And so all these people work in, a lot of them are Aussies, work in high performance. And so this also is modeling a lot of the things that we were talking about at the conference. You know, immerse yourself in a learning community and be a learner. And this is what the guy at the other end, I have my arm around him with Stanford hat and the beard, the goatee. He won 8 national championships at Stanford. He's the water polo coach there. And he's trying to learn all the time. So this is what I see with the best of the best. They never stop learning, always trying to learn. So when we went in there and they gave us a tour and explained how they operate, one of the things that really hit me was they really created an environment that in principle is to get people to do really, and like win a gold medal or a provincial championship or make a team, whatever it might be. Like these are big achievements for people. So we need them to dream big. We need them to fail. We need them to take risks, right? And we need to have what underpins that, what I'm learning more and more, what really underpins that, yes, there's technique and talent and physical training and everything else goes into that. But you can't do any of that if you can't be yourself. We're asking you to become the best version of yourself, you know, whatever, wherever that takes you. So, and you can think about this, I'm sure, in your own experiences. Where are those moments where you really feel alive? You know, talk about flow or in the zone or things like that, where you just feel at ease. You can be yourself. So when our athletes come to our programs, they travel with us, whatever, a camp, whatever it might be, do we create an environment where they can be themselves? They can be, we just allow them to be the best version of themselves. And that takes so much pressure and anxiety off of people because you're not trying to be someone else or play a role. You can just be yourself. And so I'm going to give you a moment here. I'm going to put you in breakout room again, and then we'll come back and I'll share with you some of the things they do at Google X to create that kind of space. Okay. So this first question, I'll put you in rooms of maybe 3 or 4 and just give you a couple minutes. You know, what role do you personally play in creating psychological safety in your role? Okay, your team, your program, your club, whatever it might be. And again, you see the definition at the bottom there, feeling and belief that you can share your thoughts, opinions, and ideas freely with being, you know, degraded or shamed. Just be yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a few minutes in breakout rooms and we'll come back on that one. I'm going to recreate the breakout rooms so you'll be in probably with different people and we'll say, yeah, groups of 3 or 4 so you can have some good discussion there. All right. Okay. I'll give you 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes.
Oh, notes. Shoot.
We're letting everybody get back in here. Don't worry about it, Steve. If you don't see it,
Yeah,
I'll
I
type
can't
it in there
figure out
for
how
you.
to do it.
Yes. Okay. So just making sure everybody's back in here. All right. So hopefully that got the juices flowing a little bit and some conversation around psychological safety and the type of environment that we create. So what I'd like to do, I had a good chat with Steve, and if you're comfortable, share in the chat either a statement, a quote, a behavior, a routine, something that you do or you've seen or you like that helps create psychological safety. So Steve is trying to figure out how to type in the chat, and I can put it in there for him. He shared that he likes to ask athletes after they attempt something, how did that feel? So that's an invitation for them. It's not a mandate, like you have to tell me something, because we don't want to shame people into sharing if they're not ready to share. But we can ask, how did that feel? And if they, it's not a hard question to answer, right? But it's an invitation to share and to be open. And one that comes to mind for me, I'll type in there, is and again, anything that I find interesting is probably not something I came up with, something I borrowed or stole from somebody else. But this quote, maybe you've heard it before, focus on being interested more than interesting. So when you're with people, taking a taxi ride, you're at a camp, you're at an event, wherever it might be, we all love to talk about ourselves. That's normal. That's human nature. It's easy, it's fun, it's engaging, but it's hard to focus more on getting the other person to share things about themselves. So I always remind myself of that if I find myself slipping into that mode where I'm just telling my story. Focus on being interested more than interesting. So pull from them. What are your hobbies? What do you like to do? Where'd you go recently? What's the weather like up there? So that's kind of always helped me to try and pull people into that space where they can feel comfortable. Yeah, there's a few good ones coming in here, I see. So Glenn had one in here, the rule of two. Katie shared the rule of two. Can you explain for the group what the rule of two is?
And I did type Katja, but it came out Katie. But I'll let Katja tell.
Sure. So I work for the PSO, so it's not directly with athletes, but we've put in a rule of two with difficult conversation or difficult topics to cover with whoever in the community, that both sides have a chosen other person with them, so that it creates a bit of more transparency, bit more trust building and comfort in the room. So we've taken the rule of two, I wouldn't say beyond what it's meant to be, but we're just stretching it further.
I like it. I like it. Yeah, I mean, all these contexts, you're working with people. It doesn't matter if you're in the office or out in the field or wherever. Yeah. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. Timeless, classic for sure. Yeah. Did anyone have anything else they wanted to share? You don't necessarily have to type it in the chat, but something you've seen, a routine, a ritual, a behavior that you feel, yeah, that definitely gets psychological safety. Okay. Yeah, just checking the chat. A few more coming in. One thing that this triggered for me too, when we want to pull people in, we want our athletes to take ownership, or the people we're working with. So we want to ask questions, we want to give them autonomy, we want to pull them into the conversation. But it's also really hard, just like we're doing here, when you put people on the spot, right? And force them to share something. And maybe that's not how they're wired, or they need more time to reflect on it. Or the trust isn't quite there yet. So what I've found to be really helpful when I do want to pull people in is to prime them, just like you prime a pump, right? To prime them. So at some point in private or in advance of when I want them to share, let them know I'm going to ask you to share. So, hey, later today in the session, I'd like you to share something or share what you just told me in private. Are you comfortable doing that if I call on you? As opposed to just calling on somebody in front of a group. And then they're stumbling, and then maybe they get embarrassed, and they just say something to get out of it, right? So it's not really meaningful or deep. So I think sometimes, and then we sometimes inadvertently shame them in those moments. Like, come on, what's the big deal? It's just us. It's just your teammates. Just share something. But maybe they're not ready for that just yet. So how, in terms of psychological safety, thinking about priming the pump, priming them to be able to share in a safe environment. So just because I feel like it's safe doesn't mean they feel like it's safe, right? Okay, so some other good ones coming in here. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Jen beat me to it. Jen C beat me to it. I see there. Exactly what I was thinking. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen again and share with you a few things that Google does, or Google X, okay? So we're moving off of here. Let's do this. All right, so psychological safety, who cares? Yeah, it's nice, feel good. How does that relate to getting better and performance and doing really hard things? And this is just one example of one of the challenges that Google X was tackling while we were there, trying to think about how do you get reliable internet to billions of people around the world. You live hundreds of miles away from infrastructure, mountains of Nepal, or out in, out in the bush in Australia, in the outback. Like, there's a lot of people. Majority of people on the planet do not have access to reliable internet, which is creating a bigger and bigger, not, I'm saying the answer to all our problems is the internet, but it creates a bigger and bigger gap between knowledge and haves and have-nots and ability to participate in that environment, in that economy. So one of the ideas they had was, like, forget power lines and satellites, let's have helium balloons that can transmit signals, internet signals, and we can have these balloons anywhere. They're relatively inexpensive, and we can bounce signals from balloon to balloon to balloon anywhere on the planet, right? So that's one of the things they were working on at the time. But and you may have heard this before, but this was new to me. We teach through stories. So this is a story that they use. This is one of their fundamental stories. If you went to work for Google X, you would hear this story. This is how they operate. And the idea here is you tackle the monkey first. And so they put this challenge. Remember, this is a group of people we brought together to tackle the hardest challenges. And so when we are faced with a hard challenge, and hard is relative, right? So it's always going to be hard when you're learning something new. The challenge they've kind of put out to the group is, could we teach a monkey to recite Shakespeare while standing on a pedestal? So here's the problem. Here's the puzzle, right? So when you give this puzzle to people, typically what people do is they focus on building the pedestal first. They do the thing they know how to do first. So they invest all this time and energy into building a really nice pedestal, because we can do that. We know how to do that, and the technology is available to do that. But that's the wrong approach. Because now all you've done is waste our time and money and energy and resources on doing something we already know how to do. So we're no further ahead. In fact, we're behind, because we wasted time and money on something we already know how to do. So they flip it and they challenge you to do the impossible thing first. Let's try and figure out how to get a monkey to recite Shakespeare. We can build the pedestal later. And you've heard this in different forms, right? Like when you're stuck with a challenge or a puzzle, let's tackle the low hanging fruit first, right? Build some momentum, feel good about ourselves. But you're not making progress. You're just postponing the hard stuff. but you feel good about yourself, and yeah, look at how far we've come, but you haven't done it. You haven't done anything. You haven't achieved anything yet. So in their space, this is how they operate, because we don't want to waste in their, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars and years of research and development on building a really nice pedestal. That's a waste. So I want you to tackle the hardest part of this first, so you fail quickly, right? We'll learn real quick if this is worth investing more time and money and energy into this. Maybe we park it because it's just the technology doesn't exist yet. We're not ready for it. So how does this relate to us in our space, right? We're asking people to do things they can't do yet or do better. And the default's going to be failure, because there's a reason they can't do it yet. So they have to feel safe in those environments. And we have to make it easy and rewarding to take risks. And you think of sport, my experience, right? A lot of youth sport, when people, even school, right? When you take a risk and you put yourself out there, you either get shamed, embarrassed, ridiculed, benched, yelled at, punished. Like, why would anybody take a risk? So we play it safe. And you see this with kids all the time, right? They learn these behaviors. They play it safe. I don't want to stand out. I don't want to stick out. I don't want to embarrass myself. But you're not going to be great or get better, right? So how can we use these principles to make you want to enthusiastically run towards the really hard things? And there's four, and you'll have access to the slide deck, so you don't have to worry about writing these things down. But if you look at some of the science around psychological safety, one of the models looks at these four different kind of levels of psychological safety. It's almost like Maslow's hierarchy, with meeting basic needs. So one basic need would be safe, inclusion safety. Like I feel like I'm part of this group, right? I can be accepted. This is who I am. I'm dorky, I'm funny, whatever. You can just be yourself. That's what they might refer to as inclusion safety. Learner safety is another level where now I can really feel free to learn. So stage one is, yeah, I'm part of the team. I'm part of the group. I got the swag. I got the jacket. I'm on the team. But another level of psychological safety is there's no dumb questions. I can ask questions. I can put my ideas out there. I can try things, I can give other people feedback without being shamed or ridiculed or yelled at, right? A third level is what they would refer to as contributor safety. And this is where you can go beyond learning and really be an active shaper of the learning for other people. So teammates, peers, other people you work with, right? So you can really shape that experience, not just be shaped by it. And then the fourth stage they refer to is the challenger stage or challenger safety. This is where there's no fear in challenging anyone about their ideas or how we do things, whether it's the coach, the manager, the CEO, whoever it is. If we feel comfortable, it's almost like the emperor's new clothes, that old, story, like nobody wants to say anything. Hey, by the way, you're not wearing any clothes. Like, do you feel comfortable pointing those things out? And I see this all the time. This to me is a great team or a great organization. If you could check these off across your organization or your team or your club or your program, everybody feels connected. They feel part of it. Everybody feels comfortable in asking questions. Everyone feels comfortable challenging each other and contributing. This is a separator if you have this kind of profile in your program or your team or your club. And this is inspiring. This is appealing. It's like a magnet. We all seek this out. We don't always get it in our workplace, right? So we find it with friends or hobbies or clubs. This is what draws us to the human experience. So how do they do that at Google X? So they take these huge problems that no one can solve or has solved. They try and integrate and create technology to help solve those problems in radical ways. And this is Google X. So these are specific things they do at Google X. When they have a challenge or a problem, the first thing they do is what they call a bad ideas brainstorm. Not a good idea. So you don't get stuck on, let's think of how to solve this. It's like, what are the most ridiculous, crazy, stupid things you could think of, ways to try and fix this? So the whole purpose here, again, is to feel safe, sharing ideas, challenging, and priming the pump, getting the juices flowing, warming up your creativity. So it's just throw all the dumbest ideas you can think of, throw them out there. Then they work on what they call pre-mortems. And most of us do post-mortems, right? In our space. Something happens, a championship, an event, what? All right, let's do a debrief or post-mortem. What did we learn? They do pre-mortems. So they keep challenging the ideas and saying the hard things out loud, because we're all thinking them like, that'll never work, or that's a dumb idea. Why? Tell me why you think that's a dumb idea. Tell me why that will not work. So it's the pre-mortem. Say it out loud. Then killing a project early for them gets rewarded. So they actually get promotions based on how quickly they can kill a project. So because you're saving Google millions of dollars in time and money and resources, let's not play it safe and keep those ideas to ourselves and those challenges, and then we learn later it didn't work. Now we've wasted 9 months. So the quicker you can kill an idea, the more it's rewarded. Like by showing not just, hey, that's a dumb idea, like being, showing why that won't work and doing research on it. So that actually gets rewarded. So you see how they're creating an environment of innovation and psychological safety. And then understand and agree that we're going to get stuck. So it's not about finding a seamless path to where we're trying to go. We know we're going to get stuck. And that's not a problem. That's not a failure. That's not, oh, we need fire the coach, reassemble a new team. We're trying to do things that no one else is doing, in this case, in the world. We're going to get stuck. Even with all the resources and the best access to everything, we're going to get stuck. So that's not a failure. So we're getting low on time here, but I want to finish up on a couple of things. As you reflect on this more in your own environment, how would this look in our space, right? Now, this is just a Google example, Google X, but it's probably, the best in the place in the world for innovation and design. So what would this look like? What would those principles look like for us in our space, trying to help a young athlete or our club or our group of coaches or our community tackle really hard things and big challenges? And again, big being relative, right? Like big might be, in our case, helping a kid move up a level or learn a new skill or grow our club with our membership, whatever it might be. Julie and I were talking about this in FIS. Like, what about skiing with no snow? Right? There's a big problem. Seasons are changing. So are these problems being tackled in an environment of psychological safety? Otherwise, we're not going to solve them. And I love this quote here too. Where does innovation really get stuck? Where does progress really get stuck? It's not, we need more resources, we need a better training facility. That's not the issue. It's emotional issues. We get in our own way, we get in each other's way. And that's where psychological safety is. We don't need another special budget or a sponsor or a big fundraising drive to get psychological safety. We can do it. have access to it. But you have to be audacious in those moments. And so I'll leave this with Julie and she can share it out. If you did want to dig a little deeper into this, there's some good literature, some good short articles and blogs and things around psychological safety and Google X and tackle the monkey first and all these ideas, which I find is helpful when the more we kind of get out of our lane and look across the landscape, cross disciplines and things like that, it makes for a richer conversation and richer reflection for us. So yeah, you'll have access to this, and these are just some. You could find others out there, but some that I found were helpful when I was kind of working through this. So I'm going to stop it there. We got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I'll just kind of pause. General thoughts, comments, questions. Anybody want to throw anything out there? Either something you're thinking about or something you've heard that's similar, or even a question about other things that they do at Google X. Maybe that might be relevant.
Mark Arens has his hands up. Wade, if you want to go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I think especially these last few points really point to me to that what you were mentioning at the conference of that ugly practice and that safe spot to, yeah, today we're going to be ugly, and you're going to kind of flip our traditional values of, hey, if you have a failure, you're going to, like you said, benched, or we're not going to reward that, but you're going to reward failures within a practice. And I think that's having those places and opportunities within a team as an individual, or as in a team sport. I think that's really valuable. And that concept of an ugly practice has really made a lot of impact on me since you shared it. What was that, a couple of weeks ago? So I think that was really neat, and tying that idea of ugly practice back into the last few points there of the Google X project.
Thanks for sharing that, Mark. Yeah, there's actually a book called Train Ugly, but it's the same idea. Just what I find, the more you read about these topics and kind of dive into these topics, they're not new topics or new ideas. They've been around for a long time, just they're under different disciplines or different terms or different language. But yeah, like growth mindset, resilience, mental toughness, grit, all these things. You can't be tough unless you can be yourself, in a sense. Like you can't be great until you get to a point where you really feel that you have the support you need and you can be yourself in those environments. I mean, talent will take you a long way, but you're not going to necessarily reach your potential. And more importantly, you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to enjoy the experience. Like, that's why I always feel you can't have it all. You can be great at what you do. You can reach your goals and you can enjoy it while you're doing it. It doesn't have to be miserable and, this terrible experience. Other thoughts or comments or questions? Yeah, Julie, you had.
I just have a question, Wade. Years ago, I was presented, maybe it's the opposite of bad ideas brainstorming, but we used to start off conversations with, sorry, I'll turn my video on, find 3 good things. And so whenever someone would throw out an idea, the first thing you had to do was find the good pieces in it. So instead of sort of bad ideas, it was like someone would throw an idea out and our first reaction would be to go like, oh, that's a horrible idea, or, oh, I can tell you why it won't work. We had to challenge ourselves, like our coach made us challenge ourselves to find at least 3 ways that it could work, or pieces of it could work. So then it started challenging the people in the group to be like solution-based instead of like negative. So I guess I'm asking, like, Google starts with a bad ideas brainstorming, whereas ours was, find the functioning pieces. Can you is that maybe an approach that would stall thought, or do you think that's just a different approach that might give the same outcome?
No, that's a great example. And I think context is everything. So working with 8-year-olds, maybe we're gonna try and build some habits of empathy and trust and getting outside of your little narrow view of the world. So we're gonna try and find good things about that idea. But at high performance, that's a waste of time, honestly. That's just postponing getting to the hard stuff. That's the pedestal. Hey, let's find good stuff about it. It's not a good idea. It's not. And I'm not going to give you 3 fluffy things to make you feel good about yourself. It's a terrible idea. And it won't work. And here's why it won't work. Right? Like, so context is everything. That's why I think knowing your team, knowing your club, knowing the developmental stage of the people you're working with, maybe especially early in bringing a team together of young kids, I don't want them bashing each other and you're stupid, that's dumb. Then they make it personal and they're not,
Sorry.
yeah, they're not necessarily emotionally mature enough to process that. So maybe the 3 good ideas, that maybe that's awesome for early in development, younger kids, early team. But as you get into high performance, that it's honestly, it's kind of a waste of time.
Thanks.
I have a question. The other day I was listening to a podcast called Dare to Lead by Brene Brown,
Yeah.
and they were talking about brave spaces versus safe spaces. And it was a really interesting podcast, which kind of challenged your initial idea of a safe space. And I was curious, Wade, what is your personal opinion on brave versus safe space?
Well, you just listened to the podcast. What do you think? Why don't you share with us?
Well, what I think personally,
Yeah.
I think I like the idea of a brave space.
Right.
We
Right.
were discussing it in the breakout room, and a safe space is easy to identify for yourself, but it's really hard to identify on behalf of others, because you can't know what others are feeling and thinking at any given point. But a brave space, it's something that you can actually facilitate and encourage. And eventually, I think the psychological safety will be in that brave space. But it's hard to attain psychological safety without a brave space.
I love where you're going here. I mean, this is a real big benefit of having shared conversations around, because I can listen to a podcast or I can read a book or I can go to an event, but unless we make that public and challenge each other and share. And that's why I think it's so important that we have these communities of practice, and also you get outside of skiing and you have these conversations with people in other disciplines, engineers and lawyers and doctors and teachers, and oh, in my field we call it this. Oh, and we do this over here. Oh, okay. So how would you define a brave space? What would be a characteristic of a brave space?
Me?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a tough question.
Don't overanalyze it. Just if so, I bump into you and you say, hey, I just listened to this podcast and talking about a brave space. Oh, that's interesting. What is a brave space? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think it's dialogue and giving each other space and listening to other people's opinions, asking questions and listening.
And I'm learning with you too. I've read some of Brene Brown's literature. I haven't read all her material, but and I put it in the chat for those of you. I think I had mentioned at the conference too. Brene Brown is a great resource. Lots of free resources on there too, especially working with people. And again, we're not training skiers or athletes. We're training people who ski, right? So I think a brave space for me, knowing Brene Brown's perspective and her work, is kind of the difference between empathy and sympathy. So I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't want to be the victim. I want to make a connection with you. I want you to make a connection with me. And are you creating an environment where people, that's where I see the overlap with psychological safety. It's kind of the inclusion safety maybe, and the learner safety, where you can be yourself. And it's hard to, it takes brave, to be yourself takes a lot of courage, right? You have to be brave to put yourself out there. So that's where I see those areas kind of overlapping. Be actually fascinating to ask Brene Brown about that. See if we can get her on one of the calls. But that's where I kind of see those space, because the psychological safety literature comes mostly, from my experience, psychology, counseling. So I'm not sure. I haven't seen Brene Brown explicitly make that connection. Maybe she has. I haven't seen that. But I think you bringing it to the table here is a really good catalyst for us to reflect more on that and dig a little deeper. And Julie said she's going to get Brene Brown for the next event.
Yeah, I'm going to dip into that huge budget that I have. It's
But I
interesting.
see, Julie, I'm looking at your chat. I think that's a good point. Like, Brene Brown is probably out of our budget, but Brent Brown probably is available.
Oh, yes. It was interesting. I was wondering if you can have one without the other. Can you have a brave space without a safe space?
Yeah, that's a good one. Good reflection.
I'm just conscientious of time, and I hate to end an awesome conversation like this. But I do know I'm getting a bunch of messages privately that people have to bounce to the next one. And if we can just carry this over, and if everyone's okay, perhaps we can, Wade, start off the next one. There's everyone's reflection question, is to figure out what is a brave and what is a safe space, maybe for themselves, maybe for their organizations, maybe for their athletes, and maybe come back and start the next conversation, setting that stage. But I won't purport to tell you how to do your job, Wade, so I'll just leave that there. I do want to share.
We're at stage 4. This is challenger safety. You're challenging right now.
I am going to just very quickly, Emily Young's going to kill me, but I thought, Wade, you'd like to see the impact that you're making on the young at heart there.
That's great.
So there you go. That's June. She's enthralled with your presentation, Wade.
Awesome.
So there you go. I just wanted to say we will continue. Right now, we have at least 2 more intergenerational programming. Yes, thank you, Holly. We have at least 2 more presentations with Wade scheduled. They'll be out, they're in the division newsletter, they're on the coach WhatsApp, the links will be posted as we get closer. So we're really hoping that everyone here will join us again and invite their friends to join us as well. So a huge thank you to Wade for, again, his time, his thought-provoking leadership and conversation, and to everybody for joining us today. Throw me an email if there's topics, if there's conversations you'd like to have in this forum. Absolutely, please throw me an email. We are open to all sorts of ideas. This is your time, your space, so we want to make it as meaningful for you as possible. Wade, any last parting comments?
No, I love it. This is great. Thank you, Julie, for showing the leadership here to continue to push the conversation, continue the conversation, and for everyone taking time out of their day to join and contribute as you can, given where you're at. Yeah, let's keep the conversation going. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And I think July 13th is our next one. So check the chat. If you're not in the WhatsApp group, fire me an email. I'll make sure you get the invite. And if not, we will all see you in a month or so. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.